Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Town of Concord Public Works Commission meeting, and in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. The Public Works Commission is conducting this meeting on December 8th, 2021 at 4:00 p.m. local time on a Zoom platform in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st of 2020 and amended on May 7th. I ask that all the public work commissioners, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. For members of the public, when I open the meeting to public comment, in order to be recognized, please use the raise hand button option on Zoom, or *9 by phone, or even just wave your hand. And if your video's on, we'll see you. If you are recognized, please state your name and address. That's very important. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on the town's website. So our first item of business is to call to order. I, Jeff Vassar, hereby call this meeting to order. All commission votes will be taken via roll call. We will start with an attendance roll call of commissioners. When I announce your name, please reply. David DeLong.
Here.
Andrea Solomon.
Here.
James Terry.
Present.
Casey Winslow.
Here.
Jeff Vassar. Here. So our next item of business is review and approval of our November 10th, 2021 Public Work Commission meeting minutes. So first of all, I'm wondering if there are any comments from the commission members on those meeting minutes. Looks like there are none. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Dave motion, second by Jim Terry. I already asked for discussion, but any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll do a roll call for the motion. So the motion is to approve the meeting minutes. David DeLong,
Aye.
Andrea Solomon,
Aye.
James Terry,
Aye.
Casey Winslow,
I didn't attend the meeting, so aye.
I ran into this at the last meeting and I was told that I could vote affirmatively if the other commission members who were present thought they were a complete representation.
Excellent. Aye.
Jeff Vassar, aye. So next item is a review of our calendar for proposed future meeting dates. That'll be you, Alan, correct?
Okay, well, just sort of tee it up. We have actually nothing scheduled, nothing time sensitive for January. That would be our next scheduled meeting would be January 12th. But just about to look up, there is a special town meeting, coming up, with the middle school. There's nothing specific that I'm aware of where Public Works is, needs to be engaged, but I'm looking into whether we need to have a meeting, in anticipation of. Often with town meetings, we do have a placeholder. This is a little bit unusual as it's a special town meeting with only one item, for discussion. But there is a placeholder for January 12th at this point, the second Wednesday at 4 to 6. That, I don't have a planned agenda at this point.
Okay. Yes, David?
So you'll let us know, Alan, if there's going to be a meeting, otherwise we should assume no, or.
Well,
I'll give you
there's
the second, Jim.
Yeah, why don't you, I think Jim has some
Okay.
thoughts too. It's
Sure.
and again, this is a proposal as a draft, but we can always include items or interests that the Public Works Commission has for consideration too. It's an opportunity to raise, thoughts. So, Jim, maybe you have
Yes.
an idea.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts. A couple of the major items that we're going to be hearing about today are the capital program budget for 5 years and specifically a roads program update. I would like to propose that we actually get a face-to-face meeting and have a discussion amongst all of us so that we understand more from the staff what these two things mean, because we haven't had a 5-year program or a budget projection in the past. And I think that it's very good that it's being done, but probably tonight is not the time to ask a lot of specific questions about that. Also, 3 of our members we have never had a face-to-face meeting with. And I think it's something that if the other members are comfortable with that, I would propose that we do it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the same timing, so that it would be efficient for staff who might be able to attend and not have to wait until a 7 o'clock time when our meetings used to be when we did meet in person. So those are my suggestions, since I noticed that there's nothing specific that we have to accomplish in January.
Thank you for your comments, Jim. What do the other commission members think of that idea?
I would
Jim,
be happy to meet in person. It would be great to see you all face to face and ask those very important questions.
I definitely agree with Andrea. I'd love to see you again. And, you know, David and Jeff never, you know,
Yep.
we've been meeting like this for, feels like a couple of years now. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Jim. I think we should plan on that meeting date and in person unless something unusual happens. And your agenda items, and there may be more to add. You know, Alan
Correct.
and I stay in communication. There may be some other things that come up. So I think we should plan for that date.
Yeah,
Cool.
and if anyone does feel uncomfortable, they can certainly join by Zoom.
Yep.
Because I know the select board had a meeting this last week. 4 members were in attendance and 1 member was in attendance virtually.
That's right, Jim. And I will just offer, sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to ask, Alan, can you, and Anna, can you run a hybrid meeting? Do you have the technology to have anybody who can't come, even particularly the public, if they can't come, to be able to observe by Zoom or participate via Zoom? And does this mean I have to change out of sweatpants?
Well, the answer to the first question is yes, we do have hybrid capabilities. We have not leveraged them for this meeting yet, but we've done them for other meetings. We'd be meeting in the largest room we have on campus is over at 141 in the planning department area. I think that gives enough space so we can, you know, practice, you know, kind of the best, you know, kind of social distancing, but, you know, recognize that it's not a huge room. But then even if you look at this audience, it could almost, you know, accommodate this group. And it does allow for people to participate remotely as well. So if people are uncomfortable or even, you know, not feeling particularly well, you can still participate this way. It doesn't exclude that. And I think, Jim, I like the idea. Maybe we'll entitle this a meet and greet, you know, so with an opportunity to have a conversation. So we can even ensure that staff is available, but we'll plan it out. So I think there's plenty of space and room, and it'll be a good pilot on the hybrid approach regardless. So
Great.
that's something we can accommodate.
So let's plan on that and ask if someone can just check on the availability of that room or. Okay. If there's not that room, then maybe there's another one we could use, but sounds like what you described is exactly what we need, Alan.
Yeah, I think Anna's checked 141 just in case, and it is available. So
Okay, perfect.
We'll secure that.
Thank
Alan,
you.
one thing, if I may interject, is that it's probably not a good idea for a multitude of people to bring computers.
Okay.
Okay.
Lessons learned. Not a lot of computers, I guess. Yeah.
Connectivity can be tough when
Okay.
multiple people are trying to do things.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll go with that plan. Thank you very much for the suggestions and checking into it, Anna. So next item is the general fund capital budget plan. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan. I have to step away for just 2 minutes. So I will be listening, but you just have to pick something up off the printer and I'll be right back.
Okay, great. I'm going to just introduce as part of the team and presentation. I just want to let you know that Carrie LaFleur, the Chief Financial Officer for the town of Concord, is made herself available, for the meeting. So, thank you, Carrie, for, being present. Carrie's charge is to manage all of the various town department budgets and try and figure out, based on our asks and needs, how does it fit into the big picture? With that said, I did provide a memo with a little bit of an overview of how things are being done a little bit differently this year. It's interesting in that it seems to dovetail well with the new senior management group's interests, at least in public works, to look at our programs holistically. And as we all are learning, what the real needs of the infrastructure and programs are, looking at a longer period of time over a 5-10 year window. It's consistent with what the select board had a capital plan task force put together to look at, with an understanding a lot of large projects are on the horizon. This was an opportunity for different departments to present what they envision they will need, so they can be evaluated collectively. You see that the capital investments, which are really driving the bus, have been broken into different tiers or categories, depending on the magnitude, depending on duration of projects. And it goes from a tier 1, which is basically a capital outlay. That's cash that is available that can be spent without borrowing, lower cost, everything under $100,000 seems to fit into that. We then look at costs that are from 100,000 up to 5 million, which could be borrowings or debt. Again, collectively, Public Works has its interests, but it has to be dovetailed with the rest of the community. And there's a new category, which is debt exclusion projects, which are large, multi-year, over $5 million anticipated projects. Examples, for instance, the middle school, that gets put on the radar. For a while, we had some projects in Public Works, including our facilities that were over 5 million. They were on the radar. But what I wanted to do is sort of go through and provide the commission with an overview of our specific needs and interests. And Carrie, I don't know if you want to tee up, is there anything I missed that might be helpful for our commission to think about as we're presenting what Public Works is put on the table?
I think you did a terrific job explaining our capital planning process. And I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to sit in on the meeting today. Capital plan, we're still in the process of developing our next 5-year capital plan. And the number of requests that we have received for this next 5-year period far outweighs the funding that we have set aside. And I think once we get through the middle school project, the next thing that we really need to talk about is this tier 2 capital project, because right now on an annual basis, we're allocating about $5 to $6 million per year for these tier 2 capital projects. And that has generally been reasonably sufficient based on the requests that we have been received. But again, for this next 5-year period, the requests that we have received total between $8 and $13 million per year. So this is much larger than what we've typically seen. And we really need to have a conversation about the appropriate level of resources to dedicate to this tier 2 capital. And that's why I wanted to sit in on your meeting today to hear more about your specific requests and maybe what you're hearing from the community, and that will help inform the discussion going forward. And again, after the middle school, after we get past this special town meeting. But it's an important discussion to have, and it's going to be a challenge given the magnitude of the capital projects that the town is and will be asked to fund. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, I'm going to just sit back and listen.
Okay. Okay, great. I will, if I can share the screen, what I'm going to do is bring up a table that might help us all. Let me see if this comes up. Do you see a table on the screen at this point that says CPW General Fund 5-year capital plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this was included in the packet with the exception that there was an error that we didn't catch on the way out when we were doing the final number crunching. This, what I'm presenting is actually corrected. And the error that went out was, if you look under FY, it was FY 23-24 in the area where we have parks and trees down here. And there's this artificial turf restoration project. That's the Doug White Field. We had it originally tentatively identified for 23, but we realized it was more of a 24 project. And so there was some math errors in the fact that we corrected the table, but the totals didn't jive if you did the math. But this has been corrected at this point. So just wanted to kind of walk you through it. But what I do want to do is pay attention on the big picture, which is in essence, if you look at, we'll talk about engineering kind of projects, initiatives over here first, and Steve Dukran is, available to answer some specifics. But what I want to draw your attention to is, the broader, kind of vision or needs that engineering division identified is they've broken up the various assets, infrastructure that they're responsible for managing, and they've done it in a way that has been, put in the categories over here on the left. But when you look at them, if you look each year, over the course of 5 years, you're talking of millions of dollars in these, sort of tier 2 initiatives. These are which we're going to require borrowing, what Carrie was mentioning, to the tune of about $33 million, sort of combined. And what we think is, and what our charge was, is what are the numbers? What are the real numbers that we need to know as a community to invest so that we can maintain the quality and level of service we expect, whether it's conditions of roads, whether it's the functionality of our stormwater systems, whether it's, improvements that we expect with traffic management, mitigation. And so whether it's our parking lots that we own and maintain and repair. And when you look over a 5-year period, it's not surprising to realize the numbers are fairly substantial. And Carrie volunteered that she had never been provided this level of detail or this window into the future, which is very helpful for her to understand. But it's also important for us to know this is what we are presenting as a need. We understand that the town has to figure out if it can really, kind of match our need and, put that level of investment in. But our argument to be made is if we don't spend this kind of money, we're going to see compromise in the quality of service, condition of our assets, the condition of the functionality. So with that said, rather than, you got a memo with an overview, but I thought maybe on the engineering side of things, if you want to just ask some questions and Steve Dukran can give you a little bit more detailed explanation. But what we try to do is we have more detail in the FY23. That's our focus. But some of these things are just built in, knowing that, for instance, over the course of 5 years for culverts, bridge repairs, and there's a description of how many culverts we have and how many major bridges there are. We're talking about 3.3 million over 5 years. Seems like a lot, but if you realize the Monument Street culvert that collapsed recently cost about, it was the expense about $650,000 with an emergency response. And we were fortuitous that it wasn't a catastrophic response, which have been multi-million dollars with major upset in transportation and critical services and access to a part of the community. So these are the things that we need to balance. This is our job to explain them. But, you know, with that said, I'm going to let you, if you want to kind of have any questions on at least the engineering items that we've identified without just going through line by line, but maybe have a conversation, you ask some questions.
Great. Thank you, Alan and staff. And as usual, you've provided a lot of great information here. But I'm going to start by opening it up to other commission members, see if there are any questions. Jim?
Yeah, the question that comes to my mind is, I see what we project for the next 5 years. Does that get us over the hump and that future years will be lower? Or do we expect that this kind of level of expenditure will be required as an ongoing manner?
Steve Dukran, are you there? Do you want to kind of weigh in?
Yeah, yeah, I'm here, and that's the same question that Kerry asked a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, certainly. Every program in infrastructure investment, they tell you, load it up front, get to a point where it's manageable. And that's what we'd like to do. And what we've presented here, especially in pavement management, that does get us to a point, a high pavement condition. And then you're supposed to just maintain after that. I hate to make promises because I've seen where things can backfire. You're always fighting inflation, and we're going through some terrible construction inflation, as we speak. And so these numbers represent what our needs are, what we think they are for the next 5 years. And hopefully we get to the point where we have brought everything up to an acceptable level. But we have to, one of the things we have to do is make a commitment to maintain. And maintain does come at a cost. A simple thing like a bridge, we haven't done any maintenance for our bridges for years. We need to get in there and get under the bridge and, clean out the bearings and so on. We got to change out the expansion joints, those kinds of things, because when those things go, they'll come at a higher cost. So, yeah, I agree that I want to say that this kind of front loading of the cost would get us to a point where things should go down, but I'm not going to guarantee that's the case.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
David? You're muted, David.
Sorry. I'm so busy listening to everyone. I have 3 questions. One, you were sort of alluding to is what assumptions are you making, Stephen and Alan, about inflation, construction inflation? Because we know I'm very in tune with the labor shortage in this area, and obviously everybody's talking about the inflation of materials and so forth and so on. And I realize you can't predict that, but these numbers have embedded in them, either implicitly or explicitly, some assumptions about inflation. I'm not even asking you to really answer that now, but certainly something to, well, let me see if you have any thoughts on inflation or what you're expecting. How secure are these numbers, as mind-boggling as they are?
Okay, I'll go first, Alan. When we put these numbers together, early October, there weren't good numbers from the market on inflation. So we put in, I think, 3 to 4% inflation. Soon afterwards, when we were done, we started hearing about, in the last 6 months, there've been a 6% increase in construction, and they're cautioning us to be prepared for up to 8% in the coming year. And we don't even know when that's going to stabilize. So these are planning numbers that we're using. We put in a number, even the estimates are all quite rough because you don't have a good number until you do a design. And so maybe the numbers that we have will take care of inflation. Maybe we might be a little bit short, but inflation is very high and is expected to go much higher in the coming year. If we go back to the last time that led to the Great Recession, inflation went up to 15% in some sectors, on certain construction materials and metals and so on. And then it came down during the recession. So maybe we might go through the same kind of cycle where things will balance out.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, if any thought has been given to what this infrastructure money that's supposedly coming into the system, how that's going to impact this kind of construction. Not that we're getting it, maybe we are getting some, I don't know, but how it's going to change the dynamics of the construction industry, you know, who's available or who's not, because they're so busy doing other projects. That's just a comment. How are these numbers different than the last 5 years, so the last 10 years? Just for a simple example, culvert and bridge repairs. What have we spent in the last 5 years on that? Or any of these items? These represent a huge change, or is this what we've been spending all along, or where are we on that?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. David, it's kind of interesting with Carrie's response when we submitted these numbers. She hasn't seen them at this. It's kind of, we're at a order of magnitude, you know, whether it's 3.8 or 3.3, it's very different than 100,000 or 250,000.
Right.
I think we are now in the ballpark of what the numbers can and should be for appropriate investment. But I know, for instance, the way we used to manage is we'd ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars. We wouldn't spend it. We would then put it into a pool of money and eventually build it enough so it was a project. And for instance, when we do things like the Cambridge Turnpike, it was a pool of different bins of money that were cobbled together. And it was very complicated for everybody to say, well, where did the money come from? And you know, what we're trying to do now is be a little bit more disciplined with, these are the bins of, these are the needs. And if we, you know, have a question on where are we with our sidewalk investments, we need to be able to say there's been incorporated into, you know, the pedestrian bike improvements. And if we don't fund those, then our response is they're not funded and we are basically doing maintenance, and maintenance costs will go up, conditions will go down, but that's basically what we're paying for. And we just need to be able to explain that. So I think one of the early sort of asks from the town manager and Carrie, you know, were when I came on board as far as the, you know, director, is we got to clean this up. We got to be more transparent. We want to understand, you know, where are the funds and how are you spending them? And so I think this plan is the first attempt at doing that. So it goes back to order of magnitude, and it's significantly more than we've asked for in the past. You know, I think in our roads program, we used to get somewhere in the, you know, between $1 and $2 million a year, but the roads program was all encompassing. It included a lot of these different bins. So, you know, we're talking about a difference of maybe, you know, a couple $1 million a year over 5 years. Well, that might be 10 million for everything. And we're suggesting we probably need closer to 33 million.
Right. And I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think as Carrie's trying to put all these together, you know, and dealing with all the competing needs that the town is going to have. And I'm going to shut up here in just a moment. This is my last point, is and also as a Concord voter and as the finance committee, I'm trying to look at these numbers and say, whoa, you know, you want 3 million for this, 19 million for pavement. One strong suggestion I would have is what Steve sort of just did, is to really make the case, you know, on each of these categories. If we don't spend this money, what are the costs to the town? What will happen or what can happen? Like, we will have a culvert that will go and it will cost us minimum $650,000 to fix it. You know, so really building a business case, if you will, for each of these categories if we don't spend the money. Because otherwise, I'm going to be hard pressed not to say, well, yeah, but I've got to give it to this other department, so that's just my only suggestion would be to work at, stormwater improvements. What happens if we don't put 2 million into that?
Mhm.
What are the costs going to be to the town? What's the price going to be down the road?
Thank you, David. Casey?
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Oh, along the same lines as David was bringing up, Alan, you had mentioned the Monument Street culvert and when that went. Was that foreseen? Was that budgeted for? And if not, right, I didn't think so. And if not, how did we prevent it getting, from unraveling into a catastrophic, very highly expensive project? How did we do that?
So part of what we need to do is the needs assessment of these assets. And Steve and his team are in the process of doing that. Culverts were inspected, I believe, in 2011 or 12 or something like that. So there was a report. There were some recommendations. But how much was invested in culverts? I don't know. This team doesn't know. But what we need to do is, once we do the needs assessment, is prioritize where do we need to spend money, and we're going to get into that, for instance, in detail when we talk about the roads program. If you look at the roads program, generally when we're talking about, that's the pavement management. That's now what we're calling that. But you're going to get a level of detail of where would we envision spending, 3.5 million for 23, 24, 25. And we're about to tell you what the assessment tools are and how we come to prioritizing, and then what we are going to offer, for, consideration from the town of, this is what we're proposing. This is our professional guidance. I'll take the opportunity to go to David's question on the federal funding. It's important you do the needs assessment and sort of tee up projects, because if things, we're familiar with the old shovel ready concept. Well, this, when we talk about our roads program over the next 3 years, we are in essence talking about shovel ready of $10 million. So if we could get federal funds for it, we have done the due diligence to make the case that it's necessary already, not after the fact. So all these things, are helpful because they're not to scare the community, they're to prepare the community, whether it's for its own money and investment or opportunities through grants or whatever it may be. This is the beginning. This is the starting place for that conversation.
Thank you.
So just real quick, so
Sure.
Was the Monument Street culvert, was that due to beaver activity? It was, right?
Beaver activity created a condition of flow. Just, you could have it natural or unnatural, and you could make the case beavers are natural, that caused a rise in backwater that then rushed into the culvert and compromised an area that was showing signs of failure, but it was kind of hidden. And it just exacerbated a problem where we started seeing an undermining of the edge of the road. And that led to a potential, if the road goes, we have critical infrastructure and transportation issues. And so we then spent sort of emergency funds, and Carrie and, Stephen Crane were helpful in identifying the sorts of funds, but it has to come from the town. And we did not have it in our capital plan for 2021.
So is there something in here for kind of beaver management or not so much?
Yeah, that would probably fall under the culvert bridge repairs, pedestrian, or the stormwater improvements in those areas, depending on. And then the management is maintenance, and that would be probably within the highway grounds budget, where they do the lower cost maintenance inspection stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not shown on the capital.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, but before I go, any other commission members have any additional questions?
I had a question actually. I know later we'll be talking about preservation techniques for the road management. Are those techniques maybe more expensive at first as we get the equipment we need to start utilizing them, but then the repairs that we use those new techniques for maybe last longer or less expensive in the long run? And is that anticipated at all in this budget, in the 5-year capital plan?
Yeah, so the answer is, so these new techniques, preservation methods, we are going to be contracting them out. So companies will come in and do the work. And the reason why they're becoming more and more popular for per square yard, as we'll see in the next presentation, they are cheaper. They're more cost effective per square yard. And so that's why we go in there. And they, in the program that we asking for the capital dollars, that will cover those new methods as well as traditional methods, which would still be needed for roads that are gone beyond the point where you can preserve them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, everybody. I have a couple questions. One, on the capital improvements for equipment, obviously the spreadsheet you gave us is very detailed, certain pieces of equipment, types of trucks, et cetera, which is fantastic. And on many of the, I'll call them items under engineering primarily, some of the numbers fluctuate quite a bit per year. Some of the numbers look like they're maybe more like placeholders because maybe we got to do a little more research on them. And I think you answered this earlier, Stephen or Alan. I think on some of these you have more backup information about how these funds would be spent every year, and in other categories, is it safe to say we need to do some additional investigation in order to fine tune these numbers?
Yeah, let me give you an example where, and it's you folks, Carrie, you got some support coming your way, I think, with the finance planning. When we presented this to Stephen Crane and Carrie LaFleur, they identified, for instance, under traffic improvements, if you notice, they go from hundreds of thousands to over a million, hundreds of thousands over $1 million a cycle.
Yes.
And Steve Dukran sort of volunteered, well, what the plan is we need to go through the detailed needs assessment and design, and that leads into the construction. And so it's sort of a plan that could, I think we could smooth these numbers out with an understanding that our spending, and this is what's important for the community, and when we get authorization for some of these funds, realize we no longer have to limit it to just that year of spending. It could sort of bridge a couple of years. So there is a way, what we want to do is show you what our burn rate was over 5 years, but you could flatten that and basically achieve the same outcome. But the narrative here is it's by design, that you design and construct, design, construct, and that was the cycle. Steve, feel free to correct me, but I think that was the case on that as an example, right?
Yeah, that's actually what's driven the numbers to be the way they are.
Yep. I would request that as you get more detail or have detail to back up some of these numbers, that you share that with the commission. And I don't do that to second guess you guys. You guys do a great job. It's just good to have that because you never know what question may come up. On the pavement management, and I'm assuming all this is just for town funded, town borrowing. This does not reflect anything such as Chapter 90 money that may be coming to the town. And I know you can't depend on that every year either. And I'm wondering on some of these items, or maybe it's only on the Chapter 90, that I think it would be helpful for us to understand your assumptions of what you might be getting for Chapter 90 every year, so that if we see a hiccup in Chapter 90, either up or down, we know that your number may have to go up and down for a particular year, because we can't control what the state's going to do.
And that's correct. I think we call that out in the next presentation.
Okay.
But Chapter 90 generally are state issued, funds that have sort of ranged in the $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in the past.
Yep.
And again, as you said, it depends on a lot of factors the town doesn't control. But it could also be a source of funds where that's how the state disperses federal money. And maybe that does go up significantly. So it's a good question.
All I have for now. Any other questions from commission members? Anything else from staff members that oh, David, yes.
Very quickly, are there any decisions here for us? Is this just for our information? What sort of next steps relevant to the commission on this information?
Okay, it's a good question. So it's more information and awareness as far as the kinds of, the programs that are capital intensive within Public Works. These are those that are, let's be clear, general fund supported. And we also have in Public Works enterprise funds that we're not sort of drilling into. That's water, sewer, which are also equally capital intensive, but those are offset by rates and user fees. These programs are tax supported, hence they have to be put in the balance of the town's overall levy and what they need to do, kind of across the board. But David, this is more of an awareness and understanding, and I guess advocacy as people talk with you. It's to share information. So your questions here, we've got a Zoom, it's recorded, other people can listen, learn from your questions, and that's really the intent. And I will say, Aaron Mcclosko is also our highway ground superintendent on the call. He put together a lot of the details that deal with the highway maintenance and parks and trees and the equipment that you identified. And we can support all the numbers we have, but I think as you notice, there was a significant investment in equipment. And one of the things that is not on the radar here, and I think this commission needs to be aware of, there was a facilities plan that was completed, at least a draft, in the summer of 2019 that identified significant needs for our campus to be improved or even replaced. And it was big money, and it was also inclusive of what the townhouse needs were, planning, public safety. So that document exists, and we're really not in a position. There was a vote actually from the select board on Monday night, where we were originally identified as a priority, there aren't the funds available to do what we really need for the long haul of a facilities for Public Works. What we will likely do is once we get through the big expenditure on the radar is the middle school. That's driving literally the bus on a lot of these major investments. We're going to have to revisit some of the facility needs. And when we talk about the equipment we have, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars equipment, we do need to do, be mindful of how is it being maintained and stored. And I will say, if you've kind of caught wind of something called a salt shed, to the tune of $5 million, people go, a Butler building for $5 million? Well, it's not that simple, but we are not in a position to make the case, state the case, but we'll get our act together and be able to share to the community what the needs are on that front. But that really isn't a priority right now. What we have is what you see on the screen. So I just thought it'd be important to share that. So.
Thank you. Yep, Jim, yes?
A question about equipment and vehicle replacement. I'm assuming that the numbers here are the cost of the new equipment. Is there any residual value in the equipment that we have that we will no longer use? I know along the way we move equipment from front line to second line to third line. When it's no longer third line, is there a market for any of our surplus equipment?
It's not as much as you would think it would be, to the point where sometimes it's just, surplus, and it depends on how much equipment we have. Sometimes we just store it and collect it. I think most recently for the rolling stock we have, which Aaron Mcclosko can give you the specifics, but whether it's 5 or 6 vehicles I think the value is, less than $20,000. So it's not significant. It's something, but it doesn't provide, we pretty much, we use the equipment to the greatest extent possible. And then it becomes more scrap than anything.
Yes. An example is on some, Aaron Mcclosko, Highway and Ground Superintendent. Good evening. Jim, an example would be, some of the trucks that and vehicles we're looking to budget for this year. I think we have like this $80,000 placeholder for a new F-550 dump truck with a plow and a spreader on the back of it. Example of one that we purchased last year and we were surplusing out this year. The estimate we got was $8,900 trade-in value. That vehicle's 12, 13 years old now. Seen some significant road time. But another example is an F-250 pickup truck service body. We might get a couple $1,000s for. A sedan that we're trading in that's 12 plus years old. We might get $500 for. Those are kind of the trade-in values. I think the highest one was our bucket truck, which was approved last year at town meeting. And for replacement, and we might get somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 trade-in value on a $234,000 specialty piece of equipment. So those are some examples. So anytime we can trade in, we will trade in and try to get as much money back for those vehicles as possible.
Okay, I'm going to ask if staff has anything to add. Then we'll move on to the roads program. And then for the general public, we have a point later on where you can comment and ask questions, but I would like to get through the roads program and then open it up because they are related to capital investments, see if there are any public comments at that point. But if there's nothing else on the capital budget, then I would ask that you move on to the roads program and that explanation, please.
Okay, great. We will go to the roads program. Steve Dukran, you're on screen. I'm going to share the screen and tee up that presentation. Let me see how this goes. Roads program update, is that shown on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So Steve, we can take the lead on this, please.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for my voice. I think Jeff Fasher made it a prerequisite that you have something before you can present. We have a number of slides here, and Stefan is on the call too. He will help me with most of them. We will, before you in September, when we gave you a briefing on the roads program, first and foremost, we talked about the need for more dollars. I think everybody's well aware that we have been underspending. And then we introduced the concept of new technologies that we just kind of briefly talked about to be used in the program. And we also explored the concept of a more comprehensive program. For many years, we've been talking about the roads program, but if you look at it more closely, it's more pavement management. We really do not do a true roads program where you look at everything together. And so that's what our goal is going forward. Today, if you look at the next slide, what we're trying to get to, those three topics. We're going to share with you the results of the pavement condition survey that was done by StreetScan in this past summer. Since September, we've gotten the results in, we've gone through them, and so Stefan will go through those results. Then we'll discuss a little bit more on how preservation will be made part of our program going forward to make a difference in the program so that we do get better results. We did consult with a number of towns, nearby towns that are using preservation as part of their menu with very good results. So we're trying to learn from their experience and their successes. We do not want to jump right into it. In fact, Lexington has an award-winning program. They got a national award for their program, and their advice to us is take it slowly. Don't just jump in it, because you need, as a department, we need the experience in how to conduct these new programs. And I know we do. We have good experience in the traditional methods, but the new techniques, we do need the experience. We also need to have the public on board. So we will inform them what we're doing. We'll get their input. We will see as the applications go down, what kind of responses we have from the neighbors on each street. And then we want to look at the performance of these new methods. How are they holding up to weather, to maintenance, that kind of thing. So we need that kind of experience. That's why we're going to take it a little bit slowly. So Stefan will show which streets we have selected for the program starting next year and 2022. And the third topic there is what do we have for that program, FY22 preservation, as well as some the traditional methods, which streets we have chosen and going forward. And then he'll show the streets that were picked for the 3-year program using, counting on the funds, if granted, from our capital requests that we just discussed earlier. And the bottom line, when we get to this is, and to keep bringing it up, we really need to get more money into the program because we are trending in the wrong way. Stefan will show you where our PCI, Pavement Condition Index, done in 2018, it was much higher than it is when we did it this summer. And we just can't keep going in that direction. Earlier members asked about the consequences of not funding the program. A pavement condition is easy to recognize. It's there, everybody sees it, everybody drives or walks. But the other infrastructure underground, no one sees about those, no one talks about those. Culverts, drainage, sewers, those kinds of things. Those things have to be attended to, and investments have to be made. Appropriate investments have to be made, and that's why we want a comprehensive funding for a comprehensive program so we can address all these things together. And like we talked about, costs are going up. So doing nothing or staying status quo is not going to be the way to go going forward. So I'll turn it over to Stefan so he can take you through the remainder of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Like Steve said, I'm Stefan. I'm with the engineering department. But I'm going to talk to you about the road program. So this past summer, StreetScan, our consultant, did a survey of the road network in town again. StreetScan use automated cameras that detect different distress in the street. And all that distress is put in an algorithm, and that pushes out the PCI, which is the pavement condition index. That's a scale from 0 to 100, 0 being the worst case scenario and 100 being a good road. Next slide, please. As a result, also, those PCI numbers are exported into a GIS layer that allows the staff or anybody who's looking to have a visualization of the town, all the roads with the PCIs. Green and dark green would be excellent and good roads. Yellow would be fair roads. Orange would be poor roads, and red and dark red would be roads that are failed. So the result, StreetScan scanned 108 miles of roads for us, 38 mile approximately are arterial roads, 8.5 miles of collectors, and 62.4 miles of local roads. There's also 25 miles of private road that was not scanned, but that are part of the town system. And as a result, also, the 2021 survey gave us an average PCI of 66. And back in 2018, when we used StreetScan, who did the same survey for us, our survey back in 2018 was 78.4, which is about a 12-point decrease in the past 3 years, which is significant, which also shows that one, the investment was inadequate, and the treatments also, we could have been more creative with the treatments that we're using on our streets. As the engineering staff talks about pavement management, you're going to see this graph often. That's the deterioration curve for an asphalt surface. Like I said, the PCI goes from 0 to 100, and that it's not a linear slope. As you can see, Your road starts up fairly good in the first 10, 12 years, but precipitously, you lose significant PCI numbers in the latter years. To answer one of the questions that one of the commissioners, Andrea, asked about using preservation techniques, that's the whole goal of preservation, is to work on streets that are still in good condition. As you can see on the graph, the upper section is preservation. So as you spend money on that upper section, you prevent the road to get to the critical point where you have to spend big dollars to repair it. So a lot of times what we'll see, could you go back 1 second? A lot of time things that you'll see from the public, they'll be asking you why you're doing work on road that looks fine. But once you have that graph in mind, you understand that when you get to that critical point, in a period of 2 or 3 winters, you could go from something where you could have done preservation for $7 or $8 a square yards, and you jump to reconstruction that goes between $19, $20, $30, $40, up to $40 a square yard, depending on what the issue is. Next slide. So streets can also, apart from doing the survey, the data also is put into a software that's called Streets Logics. And that software has decision matrix that runs the software behind to pick the streets. That's a typical example of how the software picks streets based on the criteria that are inserted into it. It's pretty complex, and that's just a sample for one type of road. So there's a decision tree for arterials, collectors, for regular treatment, reconstructions, and there's a decision tree for local roads, for regular treatments and preservation. So that decision tree is a lot larger than what you see in that template right now. Next slide. So as a result on this most recent survey, these 2 graphs shows exactly where we are. There's a 4-category reconstruction, which is the most expensive. It's about 13 miles. Rehab, which are what we call mill and overlays, about 6 to 7 miles. And then the big part is roads that are ideal candidates for preservation, which is about close to 70 miles. And then are good roads where you could only do maybe routine maintenance, crack sealing, is roughly 13, 14 miles. Next slide. So as a backlog also, what this survey shows us, like the cost to repair every road in town as of the date of that survey is 14 million, close to $15 million. But one thing with, if you go back to the PCI curve, that number is not a static number. As that big chunk of road, that those 70 miles that are a good candidate for preservation, with the years, if we don't do nothing, they'll jump from preservation and go to rehabilitation. So that 14, close to 15 million could balloon quickly if nothing is done on those roads. Next slide. Now to talk about preservation. In the past, the town only used crack sealing as preservation, as a preservation technique. So everything else we're doing mill and overlays and FDR. What we're proposing starting this year, construction season 2022, is to incorporate more preservation techniques into our toolbox. Like Steve said, we're going to go slow. We're going to do a couple of streets with microsurfacing, a couple with asphalt rubber, and there's also cold in place recycling. It's in the reconstruction pot, but it's a more efficient way of doing reconstruction. What would be a typical full depth reconstruction. It's less expensive. It's less impacted of butters. Next slide. This graph right here is it's a high level view of what preservation is intended to do. The curve in red is the regular deterioration curve of a road. With preservation, what you're attempting to do within this, say, the first First of all, before even you do a first treatment, which is at year 8, you would do some crack sealing and fog sealing, which is very inexpensive between year 3 and 7. Then at year 8, you would do your first preservation technique, which what it does, it brings the road back to its original state, but for less dollars. So that curves, instead of going down, it goes back up and restarts. In year 15, you do a second preservation technique, and so on and so forth. So as you can see that curve, those two curves, red is the original curve when you do nothing, within the green curves is like you're using little money to keep your road at a high state, high PCI. You get good surface, no complaints, no potholes. That's the intent of doing preservation. And because they're less expensive, you do more work on more roads on any given year. Next slide. Benefits of preservation. It enables you to be proactive. You don't have to wait to get calls from residents to say, oh, this road has pothole, this road, the surface is rough. Because you're using, you have more access to more trees to pick from. You're proactive in your approach and you're keeping the complaints down. The treatments are less expensive than the traditional reconstruction technique, and they're also less impact to abutters. Microsurfacing or crack sealing, if people go to work, they won't even notice that we were working on the streets. It's fairly quickly. Next slide. Here's an updated cost based on 2021 construction season. That table shows you in the left column, everything in black is traditional construction methods, and everything in red is preservation with the cold in place recycling also, which is in reconstruction, but also is more efficient. As you can see for the cost per square yard, FDR is the most expensive, but a better way of comparing different treatments, there's something called the third column is equivalent annual cost. So you're comparing treatments, even though they're different, to each other because each treatment has a life expectancy. So you can see the FDR with the asphalt costs $1.74 per square yard per year, while the CIR with 3.5 inches of asphalt, which is $1.46 for the same amount of life extension to the road. So that's where preservation helps a lot. If you go down the list, a double micro costs $1, but it gives you 8 years. So do put that in mind also. Preservation techniques, when you apply them to the road, it doesn't give you that same 20-year life cycle of a regular full depth. But the point is you're spending short money to extend the life, and your 20 years could become 40, 50 years if everything goes to plan. Next slide. So this is the list of that we've picked for the 2022 roads program for reconstruction and rehabilitation. Reconstruction, basically that's gonna be where you find your regular mill and fills, your regular full depth reconstruction, and we're going to pick a couple of these to do the cold in place recycling. The reason that we haven't specified which street exactly will have cold in place recycling, we need to do some testing on the asphalt. It's asphalt thickness dependent. So until we get that data, some coring done on the streets, we won't be able to pick which streets will have the CIR, which is the new treatment that we haven't done in town compared to the FDR. Next slide. And like Steve mentioned, for the preservation techniques for the better roads, we're gonna go slow. So these are the streets that we've picked to do asphalt rubber, double micro on for the next year roads program, 2022. And we'll also do some crack sealing on various streets, about 11 miles, and some fog sealing on 4.9 miles of roads. Fog sealing is very dependent on when the asphalt was placed. The industry standard is you should fog seal a street that was paved 3 to 5 years ago. So that number 4.9 mile is going to fog seal the roads that we paved in 2016, 2017, and 2018. Next slide. So as Steve mentioned, right now, what we have is more a pavement management approach. We're just dealing with the surface. If the road has pothole, if it doesn't feel good when you're driving on it, we address it. But there is the storm drain, there is the sewer, there is underground infrastructure that we try when we can to do patches, fixes here and there. But until we get the adequate funding, we won't be able to do a holistic approach to change the pavement management to a road program where we'll be able to look at everything when we're deciding to go on our street. Next slide. The next several slide is a list of the plans that we have if we get the request that was put in the capital expenditure for the next 3 years, 2023 and 2024. It's broken down into traditional maintenance and preservation. And keep going. These, if you want to look at a specific street, you can, but the list is fairly long on what we plan to do in the next 3 years. Okay, now budget. As you can see, that table shows the budget that we spent last year, Chapter 90 and roads program, what we intend to spend this year, which is already allocated, $681,000 for the Chapter 90 and $1.3 million for the roads bond. For the next 2 fiscal year 23 and 24, we've rounded up the Chapter 90 to $700,000, which can vary and which will vary. We'll have to update that once we get those approved. These are approved in the beginning of each fiscal year. By January or February of 2022, we'll know how much we have for fiscal year 23. And the roads bond, right on the table, we're assuming that if we do get our requested approved, that's what we intend to spend. So the tables that we saw ahead of that slide is assuming that those monies are approved, and that's where that list came from. If those roads bond money change, that list is also going to change. Next slide. So with the list for 2022 settled, what we plan to do in the engineering department, like we mentioned, we wanted to do the roads program update or briefing in the fall so that we could talk to the, do some outreach to residents, talk to them, see what people who live on the street have a better understanding of what's going on their street. So that's when in the months of December and January, we'll do that outreach to get their input. And then we'll work on designing anything that we need to design and get bids out early March of 2023 for the 2022 construction season. With that, I'll give the floor back to for any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen and Stefan. As we always do, open up for any comments or questions by commission members first. Usually when there aren't any immediate questions, it means you guys did a really good job. Go ahead, Jim. You have a question.
Yeah, that's about what I was going to say. This is amazingly more information and moving us forward in the fact that we're going to be doing our roads in a better way using current technology. And I applaud the engineering staff for looking into the opportunities to do things differently and to make a phased program to adopt that to see how it works for our community. I'm excited. I hope that we do get the kind of funding that is appropriate for going forward for future years, but we'll have to see about that.
Any other comments, questions from commission members? No, I agree with Jim. Well thought out, well explained. Shows you all have done your homework, and it's all the information is there, and the community now needs to make a decision on funding. But they have all the information that will make it an informed decision on funding. Yes, David.
Just the only thing I'd reiterate is it was very thorough. And it's great. And I just can imagine some people shaking their head at the numbers though. And we just have to keep reminding them that if we don't spend this money in the way you're proposing, it's going to cost us so much more or in the future, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's if I understood you correctly, and just keep pounding that home, because otherwise people are going to just say, whoa, we've got to spend this on the middle school, on whatever, whatever we're spending it on. And so that's all. Just keep making it clear as people process the budget, the shock or the numbers, that you've really got no choice. That this is the cheapest way to do it, right? The most effective and environmentally sound.
Yep. Actually, it's speaking of that, one of the questions recommendations, ideas I have, suggestions I have is that you've pulled together all this great information and moving forward into actual implementation. I'm wondering if there are any particular standards we use on different levels of roadways in the community, whether they be smaller local neighborhood roadways or larger roadways that inform how they are, not so much the repairing, but the reconstruction, for lack of a better term. For example, we have standards for new subdivision roadways. Need to be certain width, certain type of stormwater treatment, etc. Are there any standards we use when we look at upgrading existing roadways or repairing existing roadways to adhere to similar standards when it comes to width that's appropriate for the location, stormwater, looking at ways really to, especially when it comes to stormwater, is can we minimize what may be going into catch basins based on the amount of impervious we may be putting back to replace what was there currently?
I'll take that, Jeff. So in terms of standards used in the programs, say this year 21 and prior, because the program has been so lean with funds, you're trying to just address the pavement and move forward as quickly as possible. And it is required by law that you upgrade the handicap ramps.
Mm-hmm.
You see those getting done. So that's a standard that has to be followed. We have done where if you look at widths, usually you go back in the same footprint. But if there's an opportunity to remove pavement, we can do that. And we did a little bit in the neighborhood that was done this year. We could do more. We have to spend the time evaluating those. We have to discuss with the neighborhood the impacts of reducing the street width at intersections that are too wide. We'd like to do that going forward. That's part of our comprehensive program. Stormwater, we do our best with stormwater. Most of our roads, we will have to do something with the catch basins. And if they are being reconstructed, we put a deep sumps in there. The deep sumps help in the removal of pollution. We use hoods, and it is required by our MS4 permit that we improve our discharges. So that drives a lot of that, what we do now, but we like to do even more. One of our neighborhoods that's coming up in the future, we already been told that the discharges are not clean, and we, tagged some work, for some work to be done to improve the discharge. And Also, we have a number of requests for pedestrian needs and can the crosswalk we put here, can the crosswalk be made safer?
Yep.
Can we get bicycles in the street? We would like to evaluate this a little bit better, and if we have the funding and implement those. Traffic calming in neighborhoods. Maybe we can implement some of the measures that the cut-through study had recommended. If the neighborhood agrees to wanting those kind of things. Yeah, we do apply some standards, and we'd like to apply them even more going forward.
Great, thank you. I liked all the different terms and things you mentioned there that we've taken into consideration. Those are fantastic, thank you. Any other comments from commission members? Does anybody from staff like to add anything? And if not, because we've covered a lot here dealing with capital investments from the big picture to the roads, I'm going to use this opportunity to see if there are any questions or comments from the public while this information is fresh in everybody's mind. Yes, Robert.
I guess this, to me, it points out this aspect of the lack of information that the town, not that the Public Works hasn't made available, we just don't have a forum now in the town to make this, what I call scientific and information available. The Concord Journal is a shadow of what it once was. And I wonder if there's any format where we can begin to introduce the town to this basic concept of PCI index. It's a scientific engineering process. And I think as we can build upon this information, it will certainly make the reception of these change in numbers maybe more acceptable down the road.
And before someone answers, just for the record, Robert, and a lot of people know you, but if you could just give your address, please.
I'm sorry, Robert Hilsinger, 102 Central Street. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Any response from staff on
Yeah.
the public education?
Yes, I
opportunities here?
can actually, to follow up, and Jim Terry had made a recommendation recently that we're starting to follow up. The opportunities that Zoom has created allows us to record these sorts of outreach education opportunities pretty cleanly. And for instance, the winter maintenance overview that we provided last month has a lot of good information, and we are now posting it on our website, in Public Works, so people can go see a link and learn a little bit about what we do, what goes into it. I've already talked with Steve Dukran about putting this series of the roads program online, so that you can go to the website and see, our various presentations, cleanly. We can have them cut so that people don't have to go to the whole meeting, but they can go to, presentation 1, 2, 3 of the roads and get educated. A lot of this stuff, is going to be repeated once we develop a system and routine. But, the more we can make it available, Robert, I think it's a great idea, but I think this overview, for instance, can be shared now because of the technology in a way that we hadn't really even contemplated until recently. So that's one of the silver linings of the adapting to, what the resources we presently have. So I think we're going to commit to getting these online. And then if people, or we can start sharing that you can go and get different bits of information from Public Works, I think that's a good opportunity to share what we know. So that's one approach I think that might be helpful.
Alan, also, if I could add, like Steve said, also, we went and met with public work departments of neighboring communities. If we have success with using preservation, the amount of road that we'll be working on the annual basis would be significantly more than what we've been working on. For example, Lexington, they've been doing preservation for 6 or 7 years now. And by now, year 7, I think they have 70% of their streets have had some sort of preservation done on it, which means like if we do our outreach to these people in a 5-7 year period, 70% of the town would have received the bulletin, the explanation of the different treatments. So it can happen. It will progressively, it will happen with time as we get into more preservation, because you do so much more miles of roads while doing preservation. So if everything goes as planned, yeah, people will be aware of preservation, PCIs, why we're doing this treatment and why we're not doing that. I plan on giving that information to all the people who are going to be impacted.
Right. Think of it as the
That's
pain
fine.
is it's like dental work where you go in for, if you don't go to the dentist frequently, you're getting root canals and caps and it's expensive and painful and invasive. Where if you go routinely, you start taking care of every tooth regularly, you're going to be happier, better smile, and really the quality of service. People are going to see better roads.
I don't think people want to hear about dental analogies. However,
Well-
I am curious, Stefan, do you know that Lexington's PCI now?
It's in the mid 80s.
Oh, wow, okay, interesting.
And basically Lexington is, I'm forgetting which one, but they have about the same miles of roads, I think 130. And they started 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, they were at 60 something too. And now that mid 80s. So they've been having a lot of success. They won an award and yeah.
Any other questions from the public at this point?
I see
Jeff, I see
Carlin
Carlin-
Reed. Yeah.
Carlin Reed has her hand up.
Hi, thanks, Jeff. I'm Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I live off of Understack Hill. And a comment was made during the presentation on the roads program that you're going to be seeking public input. What kind of input do you want from us? I mean, you're going to be fixing our roads. That's great. Love it. What more input do you need?
So, Carl, that's a great question. And I'm going to put this on the radar and possibly for a conversation in January, where Jeff was asking about design standards, for instance. I think Public Works has historically been challenged with making improvements to right-of-ways that are in keeping with communities' values, interests, and needs. And there is a roads policy that was developed to provide some sensitivity to that Public Works doesn't go blindly and do whatever it thinks it needs to without input from the community. So depending on the treatment, preservation may be simply awareness and understanding of what we're doing, what the conditions will look like when we're done. So they're aware of what to expect, because not every preservation technique is the same. Where if we do a reclamation, there are opportunities to change the footprint and maybe do some more invasive changes that could be done for the benefit of public safety or traffic, calming or whatever it may be. And so it is important for the commission and community to understand that we do have certain standards, and some of them are engineering, design, construction based, some are community based. And when you look at the policies and practices, there is a 1994 roads program, that was established, which said when we do roads, we have to be sensitive to the scenic characteristics of the road, of the neighborhood, attention to stone walls, trees, curves, topography, that sort of thing. You have to be sensitive to the historic characteristics of where you're doing this improvement. These are context sensitive for each individual neighborhood road we look at. We need to avoid, the policies avoid making roads wider or straightening them unless it's necessary. Avoid removing trees or walls unless it's necessary. These are policies that are in place from 1994. We need to adapt them a little bit within understanding there's more interest and awareness of bimodal transportation and sharing of the road, and what does that mean today with pedestrians and cyclists that are very, have interests. And we also, it's interesting when you look at the 1994, it doesn't talk about environmental impact, meaning the drainage and impervious cover and that sort of thing. So we're at a point where we probably need to revisit, not necessarily just what drives, decision-making and standards, but also, the schedules, so we can explain to people what a cycle is for planning, design, and construction. So it makes sense and it's efficient. So I think we need to have that conversation, and maybe the next meeting we can talk a little bit about that. I will put on the, for people to be aware that there is an initiative and movement for something called Scenic Roads Bylaw, which is enabling legislation that's been around for many, many decades in the Commonwealth. I think Concord, because it was already fairly ahead and advanced in its decision-making process and sensitivity to the various issues of, character, I think in the past realized that it may be a constraint, and maybe we already have the right model in front of us, but that is presently under debate. And I think the commission needs to be aware of what are the community interests when it comes to scenic, bylaws, and maybe learn a little bit more about what are the people who are advocating for scenic bylaw, roads bylaw in town. What is it the existing policies and practices don't cover or address adequately? Why is there a need? I think that conversation has to happen. And I've been doing a little bit of research because of it's starting to get some wind in its sail, which is it's been discussed in the late 90s. It was discussed in the 2007-8 period. It was captured within the Envision Concord document as far as an interest. And I think it's probably appropriate and important for the commission to get up to speed on that and see, how do public works interests and programs align with the community interest and programs. So that might be a good topic. So, Carlin, that's a long answer, but I think you prompted an opportunity to speak to that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Appreciate that, folks.
Anybody else from the public with a question or a comment? And if not seeing any, we will move on to the director's report. Back to you, Alan.
Okay, we'll move to have an opportunity to hear from some of the other program managers. We'll start with Melissa Simoncini. I'm going to share the screen. Let me see how I can do this. Multitask, but Melissa, you can introduce yourself as I bring on the next. Give me 1 second.
Sure thing. Thanks, Alan. Good evening, everyone. Melissa Simoncini, Environmental Services Program Administrator. Once Alan brings it up, the first slide will be a quick picture of the tree lighting downtown just this past weekend. It was a great event, really well attended. Aaron's crew was super helpful. There was a lot of waste generated during those events, and his crew swiftly took care of all those full barrels so people could enjoy the shopping experience the next day.
Did I get the screen up?
You did.
Yes, and I understand there were somewhere in the order of 5,000 participants in the event.
Wow.
So I think it was a record event. I think kind of people post-COVID are looking forward to normal as best they can realize it, but this was beyond normal. It was, I guess, the most well-attended tree lighting event we've had. So, and again, Aaron and his team helped, secure the site and clean up afterwards. So
It was also nice to see the CPW truck in the parade. Got some creds.
Very nice. And just another tip to Aaron's crew, they're doing a great job preparing the compost site for winter snow storage and other activities. Just wanted to share that the landfill compost site will be closing for yard waste collection next Saturday, the 18th at 3 p.m. Next slide, Alan. But we will be opening back up the first 2 full weekends in January on Friday and Saturday for holiday tree collection and holiday light collection. And we'll also be collecting styrofoam block. Trees and lights are at no charge, but styrofoam block is $7 a bag. Starting next week on the 15th, people will be able to pre-purchase their bags to fill and bring down to the compost site and put them in the recycling container. People do have to pick them up here at Public Works. The guys won't have them down at the site because they're not allowed to collect money down there. They're just there to help facilitate people putting them in. But if people can purchase them online or come in during our office hours, 9 to 3, Monday through Thursday, and 9 to 3, Monday through Thursday with a check, and we can help them out that way also. Next slide. Last month, we showed a picture of the paint shed before it was cleaned out, and this is just another little glimpse into what we do. The crew packed up that paint shed and filled 12 of those containers there at the bottom. Those are cubic yard boxes, and they were picked up yesterday. I just wanted to recognize, a lot of our operators, they're highly skilled. I don't know if you guys can tell, but in that photo, one of our crew members, Nick, was able to stack the 2 boxes and use the fork truck or the forks to put it into the truck. And there were just, maybe 3 to 5 inches below and beneath, and he was able to slide them right in there. So our crew is definitely skilled. And here is just another one of our many talents that I wanted to share. We recently procured a Cricut cutting machine, and we're able to make some very professional looking signage. This is for the mattress recycling trailer down at the landfill, but we can also use it for many other things, whether it's labeling barrels, making new signs for the doors here, labeling hydrants, etc. So it's another good resource that we have here at CPW. And then cardboard recycling, it's holiday season. And while the cardboard dumpsters, one of them is emptied almost every weekday at least, but still sometimes people, they're a little overloaded. So we just ask that if you're sharing with your neighbors around town that this is a resource, that you just remind them if they are full, please come back. And they are emptied Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at this point. And that is what I have from the Environmental Services Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Steve Dukran, want to speak to the engineering?
Yes, thank you. So just a note that we are winding down construction for a year. Our permits, right-of-way permits were closed on November 15th, just for emergency work or any work that's deemed necessary in order to prepare for next year. That's the only kind of activity you see out there. The slide shows work that was done on the Stowe Street parking lot. The project is to rehab the pavement and restripe it to increase parking and so on. We took the opportunity to improve stormwater by putting in infiltration systems, something that we want to do with pretty much every project we take on. This year, Hubbard Street, we got all the drainage work done, and the work is wrapped up. The contract is out there. They'll be coming back next spring to take care of the road work as well as sidewalk and curb. Over on Walden Street, DCR did some utility work to get their sewer replaced between the limits of the roadway, and as well as the next slide will show the other water line, the water service was also replaced. And the reason why they're doing this now is National Grid, who did the gas main replacement, will be coming in next spring to repave half of the street from the curb line to the center line. So we wanted to make sure that any underground work was done ahead of that final paving next spring.
Thanks, Steve. We'll go to Aaron Mcclosko, Highway Ground Superintendent. Aaron, you available?
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Aaron Mcclosko, Highway and Ground Superintendent. November is a busy month for us, kind of getting into the winter, trying to wrap up some of our smaller mid-scale projects. This is these are two photos, kind of as we started and starting to complete construction on a sidewalk project, small scale repair over on Baker Avenue, just before the train tracks. So you can see it there on the left-hand side. We're demoing the sidewalk, removing the old asphalt with a mini excavator, and there's a couple members of our highway crew there. On the right-hand side, we put down the asphalt after prepping the area, and we have a plate compactor compacting that top course. And then this is a photo of the finished product after it was opened up to pedestrian traffic. In the report, we had some new equipment. This is a F550 2021 we ordered last year that just showed up. We ordered this from Municipal Group in Massachusetts off the state contract. Very nice truck. This is actually going to be a first line vehicle for the water and sewer division. Is equipped with a 9-foot Fisher HC plow with a snow foil on the top there, and stainless steel body, and a Fisher poly spreader in the back of the dump truck. This is a photo of, this is an old water sewer service vehicle that is now second line, brought over to highway. I think Jerry mentioned earlier that some of our vehicles are reclassified and repurposed when they are needed. So before we return vehicles, if we can surplus them and keep them, and they still have some service life, we'll transfer them to the department. So this is now a highway and grounds vehicle using the park and tree side, and this is a new salt brine skid, which we purchased the tank and the pump, and our crews are very creative and very skilled, and they were able to set up this spray bar attachment that's mounted into the hitch receiver, and we were able to have now a second vehicle that we can apply salt brine on the roadways. So crew is very proud of this project. They spent quite a bit of time putting this together, and if you looked at the roads and noticed, we've been brining the roads in anticipation of this evening storm for the last 2 days, and this truck's been out on the road. So this is a great piece of equipment, and kind of addition to our services that we can provide. And this is actually a photo from today. So this wasn't in the director's report narrative, but I wanted to throw this photo in. So thanks, Anna, for taking it. Every year we have the Mill Dam Nursery School comes out, and we give a tour of our CPW facility, tour some equipment. We demonstrate some equipment. One of our equipment operators, actually crew leader today, you can see the cones in the backhoe on the left-hand side, did a little stacking demonstration where he was stacked up the traffic cones, and the students got a pretty good excitement out of that. And then they were able to take photos with some of our equipment, and we gave a kind of an overview. See a number of teachers and also parents that attended as well. So we use it as an opportunity to kind of communicate what we do in public works and a little bit about our program. And it's just a great kind of opportunity for us to share what we do with the community, and have some of the kids come in and see some of the equipment that they might read about in a book or see on TV, that they can actually see it in real life and kind of get in the driver's seat and check it out. So it's a great that we were able to do this again this year, and look forward to it every year.
Aaron, that is the future class of 2033 labor force we're working towards.
That's
here,
it.
right?
That's it. We recruit them 2 years. Thank you.
We will now kind of sign on to Jeff Moravsky, the Water Sewer Superintendent. Jeff, are you available?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Alan. Jeff Moravsky, Water and Sewer Superintendent. I've got the honor of bringing the show to a close with the last 2 slides. This photograph we're looking at here concerns the Nursnack Hill Reservoir. As the commission knows, we've been doing a rehabilitation project for Nursnack Hill Reservoir. The water tank was constructed originally in 1909. It's got a 2.5 million gallon capacity. The project scope included some of the dome improvements for the center vent, adding new gravity vents, eliminating the perimeter vent, which was a vulnerability, health and safety vulnerability to the water supply, replacing the access hatch. We've previously shown photographs of the floor slab being done. Everything went very well with this project. What we're looking at right here is the water mixer. Part of the project, the contractor fabricated a sled that will allow us to insert the mixer into the tank and remove the mixer from the tank with a pole cable. The reason this is important, water mixing eliminates stagnant zones, thermal stratification, short circuiting. There's only one inlet and outlet of the tank. So the circulation that's provided by the mixer is very important for water quality. As we were closing out the project, we were going through the process of disinfecting the tank and preparing to put it back online when we had an electrical problem with this mixer. When we removed it from, it's a submersible mixer. When we removed it from the water, it would run, but it would short when it was submerged. So there's an electrical problem, we believe, with the power cord. We didn't have a spare mixer sitting on the shelf, so we had to stop our putting the tank back online. So we drained the tank back down, and we'll have to do a redisinfect when we have a new replacement mixer. The photograph on the left is the mixer that was removed from the tank. Just for dimensions, it's a little bit over 3 feet in length, so a yardstick length. The barrel is a little bit over 8 inches. So that's about the size of a football in its barrel length. This mixer, because of how important it is, and it's also DEP approved, so that's an important point. We can't get these down at Home Depot. We checked our vendor for supply, and we were initially concerned that we could have up to a 6-month lead time. And when we pursued this a little bit more, we were somewhat pleased that the lead time is expected to be shorter than that, much shorter than that, 3 weeks time. And it was just yesterday when we placed an order for replacement mixers. We ordered 2 so that we'd have one to install right into a Nursnack, and then we would have a standby on the shelf. In case a mixer went down, we can make a quick change out and minimize disruption to the customers. Next slide. Final slide of the night. This touches on our Hubbard Street project. This circles back to engineering's road programs project. Hubbard Street was, I'm not sure when it was earmarked. Steve Ducrain might be able to speak to that better. But we had concerns about the existing sanitary sewer within Hubbard Street. We've got a mixture of 8-inch diameter and 6-inch diameter vitrified clay pipe. And I should mention that that sewer pipe celebrated its 123rd birthday this year. So we've gotten a lot of life cycle out of this asset. But because we're coming in to do a roadway project here that I believe will be either a heavy mill or a full depth reclamation, I'm not quite sure, it would jeopardize this 123-year-old vitrified clay sewer. So we put out a bid document for a construction contractor in situ form to do a trenchless rehabilitation of this sewer. And what that is essentially it's a felt sock that's impregnated with a resin. And then that resin is cured under either hot water or steam. And it forms essentially a brand new plastic pipe, structurally strong plastic pipe inside the host pipe, which is vitrified clay. So with that methodology, we're looking forward to having continued service deep into the future. Unfortunately, we did have a minor mishap today where when we were doing an install on Hubbard Street, the 123-year-old sewer actually collapsed before the cured in place pipe could cure. So we had to do an open cut excavation, and that should be wrapping up any time now. So these sorts of things can happen with vitrified clay. It's a fragile material. It is old. We don't quite know what the conditions outside the sewer pipe barrel are in the soils. But we adapted to it, and we're getting it corrected, and we'll be putting it back online this afternoon, this evening.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. That is the overview of kind of what's keeping Public Works busy lately. So.
Always busy. Again, open it up to any commission members. Any comments or questions? Very good. Then we have just general, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Any general commissioners' comments or questions? Anything you've heard of, anything you'd like to bring up that you haven't brought up already?
Jeff, I was wondering if anybody knows who controls the timer on the holiday tree. Is that us or no?
Santa.
Not us, right?
Thank you. That was going to be my answer.
That would either be recreation or CMLP.
I'm actually serious. Aaron?
Yes, Aaron.
That's either going to be recreation or CMLP.
Okay.
I believe
I think it's just a little late. It's
Okay,
not being lit until like it's completely dark, as opposed to like at dusk when it's really, really pretty. So
I'll reach out.
About 15 minutes late.
Well, we'll have to talk to our sustainability coordinator first, just to make sure we're efficient.
15 minutes. And that's the time that a lot of people are driving past. And
Yes.
it really is dark. It's pretty much so dark. So anyway.
Duly
I
noted.
really-
We'll pass along and see what we can find.
I will consult with CMLP because it probably is them. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Any other comments? Any other items that the commission members would like to bring up? Yes, David. Oh, you're on mute again.
Quick question, who has to pay for that mixer in the water tank? That problem, that faulty mixer, is that a cost? Because that can't be inconsequential. I'm losing that for a period of time and replacing it.
Yeah, that is one of many assets that we have, which is, where we look for redundancy. The mixer is a fairly inexpensive item that used to be readily available. And I say used to be. So I think it's served its useful life. It's a problem when you take something out of service and don't use it for a month or so, you find problems, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson learned is they're not that expensive. We should have one on the shelf. And that's what Jeff had volunteered. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty small monetary item, but an important, critical tool.
Sure, but I just winced when I heard you have to empty the tank and
It's a
It was not the contractor, it wasn't, we didn't anticipate failure.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad to hear it's not a big deal. I mean, relatively speaking. Thank you.
I have one quick comment before we open up to the public, and that is, as usual, thank you to all Public Works staff for what you do to help with our numerous things throughout the year, but especially at this holiday time and everything you do to support the tree decorations downtown, et cetera, events downtown. Not only adds to community pride, but it also helps our economy. It's our economic centers of our community, and it draws unique attention to them and really, helps boost their livelihood, their economic success, local jobs, et cetera. So putting this in the picture of the big Envision plan that we're all looking at when it comes to Concord. As was pointed out in the matrix you staff pulled together for our last meeting, a lot of things we touch that impact a number of different aspects of this community. So you make us all proud. Thank you very much. Any public comments at this point? I'm going to turn to, is Anna still on?
I'm looking, I don't see any hands
See,
raised or
okay.
anybody introduced. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see anyone. Thank you.
So at this point, is there a motion to close the meeting?
Move adjourned.
I'll move to close the meeting,
I think Casey
second.
made the motion and
December 8th, 2021.
Second.
dueling motions. I'll give it to David to second.
Second.
Any conversation? If not, we'll vote by roll call. David DeLong,
Yes.
Andrea Solomon,
Yes.
James Terry,
Aye.
Casey Winslow,
Aye.
Jeff Basser, aye. Thank you very much. Everybody enjoy your holidays and whichever way you celebrate, and we'll see you next year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.